Ladies and gentlemen, and children of all ages, welcome to Applewood's virtual 4th of July celebration. Please welcome the Master of Ceremonies, Nancy Eddy.
Welcome to our celebration of the 4th of July. You've been listening to Jerry Weinstein playing Yankee Doodle Dandy by George M. Cohan, and you'll be fortunate enough to hear some more from Jerry during our program. This is the 25th year that we have gathered to honor the founding of our nation, but it's the first time that we have presented it in the midst of a pandemic, which has required us to use an electronic medium. So among other changes, you will see George Washington wearing a mask. If you are able and wish to, please stand as Harriet Wendell and Rob Claflin present the American flag. And now we are lucky to hear the Star-Spangled Banner sung by Buddy Brennan, accompanied by Edith Fauge.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
The 4th of July celebrates the Declaration of Independence by the American colonies from Britain. Trouble between them had been brewing since the French and Indian War began in 1754 and ended in 1763. The main conflict between the American colonies and Britain was over the imposition of taxes on American colonists without any representation in the Parliament. This conflict broke out in open warfare on April 19, 1775, with the Battle of Lexington and Concord. To help remind us of the brave men and women who fought for the right to be free and to have control of their destiny, we now present depictions of some of the characters important in early American history, introduced by Joan Levitt.
Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is a common personification of our federal government, or of the United States in general. The name came into use during the War of 1812, but he did not get a standard appearance until a recruitment poster for World War I, showing him as an elderly man with white hair, a top hat, blue tailcoat, and red and white striped trousers. portrayed by Fletcher Davis. Molly Pitcher. Many historians regard Molly Pitcher as a legend rather than history, and suggest that she is a composite image inspired by the actions of a number of real women who carried pitchers of water to men on the battlefields of the Revolutionary War. Portrayed by Tina Schliemann. George Washington. George Washington was the commander of our troops during the Revolutionary War and our first president. He is widely regarded as the father of our country, portrayed by Sandy Alberton Shea. John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones grew up in Scotland, and around 1775 he joined the newly formed Continental Navy. He commanded American ships stationed in France and led one unsuccessful assault on England. He is sometimes referred to as the father of the American Navy, portrayed by John Armstrong. Betsy Ross. Betsy Ross was an American upholsterer who has been credited with making the first American flag. It is said that she convinced George Washington to change the shape of the stars in a sketch he showed her from 6-pointed to 5-pointed, portrayed by Peggy Daniels. Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was an aide-de-camp to George Washington during the Revolutionary War, the author of 51 of the 85 essays of the Federalist Papers, a signer of the United States Constitution, and the first Secretary of the Treasury. He is credited with establishing the foundation of our banking system, portrayed by Bill Daniels. Deborah Sampson. Deborah Sampson was a Massachusetts woman who disguised herself as a man and, in 1782, enlisted in the Continental Army. She served for 17 months, but upon being injured during a battle, the doctor treating her discovered her secret. She was honorably discharged, and after the war she fought with Congress to get back pay for her wartime service. It was finally granted with the help of Paul Revere and John Hancock. She carried a musket ball inside her until the day she died in 1827. Portrayed by Clarice Patton. The Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty is a colossal copper statue built by Gustave Eiffel and given to the people of America from the people of France in 1886. The tablet she holds in her left hand is inscribed with the date July 4th, 1776, and the broken shackle and chain at her feet commemorates the recent abolition of slavery. She is the symbol of our liberty and unofficial greeting to all who come to our shores. Portrayed by Elizabeth Davis.
William Dawes is the usually forgotten shoemaker who rode with Paul Revere on the night of April 18th, 1775, to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock that the British were coming to arrest them. Dawes took the longer land route to Lexington, arriving at his destination half an hour later than Revere. So why was Revere immortalized as a hero? Among other things, Revere's ride that night was portrayed in The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Helen Moore wrote a parody of Longfellow's poem called The Midnight Ride of William Dawes, published in the Century magazine in 1896. Here to read The Midnight Ride of William Dawes is Lacey Armstrong.
I am a wandering, bitter shade. Never of me was a hero made. Poets have never sung my praise, and if you ask me the fatal cause, I answer only, my name is Dawes. 'Tis all very well for the children to hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere, but why should my name be forgot, who wrote as boldly and well, God wot? Why should, I ask? The reason is clear. My name was Dawes and not Paul Revere. When the lights from the Old North Church flashed out, Paul Revere was waiting about, but I was already on my way. The shadows of night fell cold and gray as I rode, with never a break or a pause, but what was the use when my name was Dawes? History brings with his silvery name, closed to me are the portals of fame. Had he been Dawes and I Revere, no one had heard of him, I fear. No one has heard of me because he was Revere and I was Dawes.
Thank you, Lacey. Now maybe we will remember the name of William Dawes. Today we celebrate the foundation of an independent nation in America on July 4th, 1776. It is traditional to include patriotic songs in our celebration of Independence Day, but we cannot gather together to sing. So we have asked Jerry Weinstein to play patriotic songs in a jazz version. This is especially appropriate because jazz is the quintessential American music. Our first song is Yankee Doodle, a song popular in the colonies well before the Revolution. British soldiers sang it to make fun of the Yankees, who were pictured as pretentious simpletons. A student at Harvard is believed to have written the current version in 1776. By 1781, Yankee Doodle had turned from being an insult into a song of national pride. Declaration of Independence, which was primarily written by Thomas Jefferson. Here to read from the Declaration is Lenore Miller.
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitles them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. When a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in name and by the authority of good people and of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, and that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown and all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have the sole power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all the things and acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
But the British had a response to our Declaration of Independence. The English king at the time, King George III, was greatly angry and humiliated by the defeat of the British forces, and he was sure that America would not be able to stand alone. His thoughts were summarized in a song from the recent musical Hamilton called "You'll Be Back." Here to read the words of that song is Bob Marinac.
You say the price of me love's not the price that you're willing to pay. You cry in your tea which you hurl in the sea when you see me go by. Why so sad? Remember, we made an arrangement when you went away. Now you're making me mad. Remember, despite our arrangement, I'm your man. You'll be back. Soon you'll see. You'll remember you belong to me. You'll be back. Time will tell. You'll remember that I served you well. Oceans rise. Empires fall. We have seen each other through it all, and when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. You say our love is draining away, and you can't go on. You'll be the one complaining when I am gone. Oh no, don't change the subject. 'Cause you're my favorite subject, my sweet submissive subject, my loyal royal subject, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. You'll be back like before. I will fight and win the war for your love, for your praise, and I'll love you to my dying days. When you're gone, I'll go mad. So don't throw away this thing we had, 'cause when push comes to shove, I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love.
Thank you, Lenore. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Although women won the right to vote in the Wyoming Territory in 1869, the battle for equal suffrage throughout the country continued into the early 1900s. Parades and protests were widespread and included demonstrations outside the White House. Some things are never new. The opposition was often fierce and brutal. Nonetheless, women persisted. In August 1920, Tennessee became the 36th state to approve the constitutional amendment, and on the 26th of that month, it was signed into law, granting women the right to vote. At the Women's Rights Convention held in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York, a document primarily written by Elizabeth Cady Stanton was signed by 68 women and 32 men. Here to read a portion of the Declaration of Sentiments is Betty Parada.
When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one portion of the family of man and to assume among the people of the earth a position different from that which they have hitherto occupied, but one to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes that impel them to such a course. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of those who suffer from it to refuse allegiance to it and to insist upon the institution of a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, in view of this entire disfranchisement of one half the people of this country, their social and religious degradation, in view of the unjust laws above mentioned, and because women do feel themselves aggrieved, oppressed, and fraudulently deprived of their most sacred rights, we insist that they have immediate admission to all those rights and principles which belong to them as citizens of these United States. Firmly relying upon the final triumph of the right and the true, we do this day affix our signatures to this declaration.
George Washington went to Newport, Rhode Island on August 17, 1799, to celebrate the ratification of the Constitution by Rhode Island. Here to read from a letter that he wrote to the Hebrew congregation in Newport after the visit is Katie McGovern.
The
The citizens of the United States of America have a right to applaud themselves for having given to mankind examples of an enlarged and liberal policy, a policy worthy of imitation. All possess alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of as it was by indulgence of one class of people, that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily, the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving it on all occasions their effectual support. May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid.
Little musical interlude. You're a Grand Old Flag is a song written by George M. Cohan after he met a soldier who had served in the Civil War. As they talked, the ex-soldier showed Cohan a ragged American flag, which he referred to as a Grand Old Flag. Since the founding of our nation, and it has been increasingly bitter in recent years. As we reflect on the birth of our nation, we need to remember that America is a nation of immigrants. Our greatest national monument to this nation of immigrants is the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. In 1883, Emma Lazarus, a poet and an immigrant herself, wrote a poem that hangs inside the statue. It is entitled "The New Colossus," and will be read for us by Edith Fabush.
Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here, at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand flows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she, with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
Lee Bates, an English professor at Wellesley College, took a trip to Colorado. Several of the sites on her trip inspired her, and they found their way into a poem entitled America the Beautiful. Sites referenced by her included the wheat fields of America's heartland, Kansas, through which her train was riding, and the majestic view of the Great Plains from the height atop Pikes Peak. Joan Levitt will read from that poem, and Jerry Weinstein will play a jazz version to close out the program.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God mend thine every flaw. Confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Thank you, Joan. Unfortunately, not every immigrant who came to America because he or she wanted to. Many came as slaves and lived in miserable conditions. They were worked very hard and they had no freedom. One was Frederick Douglass. After escaping from slavery in Maryland, he became a leader of the abolitionist movement in Massachusetts and New York. In addition, he was a social reformer, an orator, writer, and statesman. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution, ratified in 1868, granted citizenship to all persons, not women, born or naturalized in the United States, including former slaves. In response to those who opposed the amendment, Douglass wrote a statement, which will be read for us by Mike Terrell.
The real question, the all-commanding question, is whether American justice, American liberty, American civilization, and American law can be made to include and protect alike and forever all American citizens. It is whether this great nation shall conquer its prejudices, rise to the dignity of its professions, and proceed in the sublime course of truth and liberty marked out for itself during the late war, or shall swing back to the ancient moorings of slavery and barbarism. The trouble is that the colored people still have to contend against a fierce and formidable foe, the ghost of a bygone, dead, and buried institution.
Last year, I said in conclusion, let Frederick Douglass's remarks be a challenge to each and every one of us to reinvigorate our democracy and to respect the rights of all people, be they new immigrants, Mayflower descendants, Native Americans, be they black, white, Latino, or Asian, be they straight or LGBTQ, be they Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or non-believers, be they young or old. Let us work together to make this a better country and a better world where we can hold this truth to be self-evident, that all people are created equal. This year, when thousands of people have gathered together to protest racist actions and to demand that the systemic racism in our own and other countries be addressed and eliminated, I see signs of hope that progress can be made. That what Frederick Douglass described as the ghost of a bygone dead and buried institution can truly be buried. I cling to the hope expressed by the Lakota cry, which said, I see a time of 7 generations when all the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life and the whole world will become one circle again. But we have had more than 7 generations since the founding of our nation to bring to fruition that Lakota goal. May we today let us each rededicate ourselves to the goals of our forefathers. One nation with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for watching. Special thanks to Patricia Wright and John Levitt, who organized this program, and all the committee members who helped. Christine Silversky, who designed the program, Josh Powers for filming the production and getting it onto Touchtown. Special thanks to Jerry Weinstein for his superb piano renditions of familiar songs. The movie Lincoln will be shown on Channel 918 at 7:30 p.m. tonight. Closed captions will only be available in the meeting room. It will be shown again on Sunday at 4 p.m. in the meeting room, where again the closed captions will be available. Okay. We will close the program with a special rendition of America the Beautiful by Jerry Weinstein. Happy 4th of July.